nerds and nerdettes and wee little nerdlings all. It's your buddy Big Johnny G, the Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming. Midday Monologue. How's it going, everyone? I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad you made a little bit of time to come and hang with me for a few minutes. So we've been doing this whole building up of a board game collection, and we've been doing it in little tiny pieces, right? So now I want to examine something a little bit larger, but I specifically waited until I finished the previous two that you saw, right? The one on zombies and the one on Lovecraft or Cthulhu inspired. Now that we got that out of the way, I want to talk to you about building up a board game shelf, building up a collection based on more general horror. There's a lot of zombie games, there's a lot of Cthulhu. They practically need their own category. But outside of that, you want a more traditional horror game? I have some ideas for you. Why don't you join me down the table? Now, I spent the last couple of weeks, first one talking to you specifically about building a zombie shelf collection for your board games, and then I spoke about Lovecraft-inspired mythos board game shelf. And I did that because there are so many of both those style of games that, to me, they are their own shelving categories, right there and there. But above them, that you can't see from this camera angle, is what I have for my general horror. Games that don't fit into zombies or Lovecraft, right? So why don't we discuss, if you're not into zombies or Lovecraft, but you still like horror, what kind of board games are there for you? I got a few that will help you start your horror shelf. Now, I do usually start off the first two categories, as you know by now, everyone, with games that are specific to only being one player, and those for two player. Couldn't really find anything that I know of, that I've played, that I have firsthand experience with, in order to honestly tell you about it. And I gotta say the same thing about two-player specific games. Now, yes, there are games coming up in this category that will handle one or two only, but not specifically for. Okay. So let's just jump right into horror games that are competitive. And one of my all-time favorites is Lucidity, Six-Sided Nightmares. You're going to want to check this game out by Renegade Game Studios. It's good for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and will take you about 20 to 30, 25, 35 minutes. Now, yes, this game can accommodate one player, and it actually plays separately as a different game. I almost mentioned it for the solo only, but it's not a solo game. It has a variant for a solo play. There's a difference, really is. But both are amazingly fun. In the game, you are a dreamer and you're trying to steal this dream energy from the dream world. But there are nightmares in the game, and they are trying to corrupt you to whatever it is they are the nightmare of. You know, it's a nightmare of envy, let's say. It wants to make you an agent of it, so to speak. And even if you do get converted to the nightmare's cause, you are not out of the game. That's another fun thing about it. Your game changes, literally switches up, and you have sort of different rules and different win scenario now that you are doing as a nightmare. But even if you don't become a nightmare, it's still a competitive game back and forth. It's a push-your-luck style dice game where you're trying to collect certain power-scoring dice while avoiding the nightmare dice, the hunting dice, the exhaustion sleep dice. There's a lot of things for you to try to avoid, but there's also very clever and tactful ways to manipulate the dice that are already out in play, or, to a lesser degree, also, though, to somebody else's dice. I can play this game all night. I can play game after game after game of this game all night. I absolutely love Lucidity, and I think it deserves a spot on anybody's horror shelf. Now, another game I could play a lot of, and I already have played a lot of, and that is The Bloody Inn. The Bloody Inn is by Pearl Games. It's good for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and should take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes to play. This plays the same way with 1 player or with 4 players. The idea of the game is set in the mid-1800s. You are a French farming family who's gone destitute. Nothing is growing. You can't survive. So you turn your farmhouse into a way road. You turn it into a bed and breakfast style place. And you take in guests. But you're also trying to kill the guests. And bribe other guests. And avoid the police from finding the bodies. And laundering money. This game has it all. This game is one step away from being a Coen's brother movie. It sounds bloody. It's called bloody. But I honestly do find it, now again, remember, you know your children better than anyone else, but I find it actually a bit of a family game. Regardless of the fact that you're trying to kill people, bury the bodies, steal the money, bribe the cops, launder the money, and do it better than everyone else at the table who are all your family members in the game. It is kind of fun. There's a little tongue-in-cheek in there. This game plays fantastic. I could play this solo, or I could play this with multiple players, and I'm going to have just as much fun around the board. You gotta have The Bloody Inn in your horror shelf. Trust me on this one. Now, one last competitive. This is actually semi-cooperative, so it kind of blurs the line between this and the next category. That game is Coma Ward. This is by Everything Epic. It's good for 1 to 4 players. This game is specific. It is 18 and up. Literally, on the box, by the publisher. Not kidding around. 18 and up for this game. And this game should take about 60 to 120 minutes, probably a little bit more, honestly. So this game, you have just woken up. You and the other players have woken up in a fully functioning yet abandoned hospital with nothing. You just got the hospital robe on. No memory either. You don't know what the hell's going on. Nobody does. The game is broken up into 2 parts. And the first part is exploratory. You're going around the hospital. You're trying to find clues as to what is going on. You're collecting items that you feel and need to have. But while you're doing this, you're learning things and you're picking up clues. And when enough clues have been gathered, you know what's going on. And that's when a scenario pack is decided upon. Usually by how the clues manifest themselves, how they come into play, will determine which of the scenario packs. And there's like 10 or 11 that come in the base game, but there are tons and tons and tons of these expansions available. There's scenarios, I mean, and they're all something different. Like maybe it has to do with ghosts, maybe it has to do with aliens, maybe it has to do with demons, maybe it has to do with a curse. You don't know what the scenario is going to be. Every time you play it, it's going to be different. The board looks fantastic. The pieces look amazing. This is a horror game that you are not going to want to play in the dark. Well, maybe I'm being dramatic there. But Coma Ward, you're going to want to put that on your horror shelf. Now, moving on into the more fully cooperative games. There are quite a few in the market. I've played a lot. I have a few in my collection, and I want to talk to you about the ones I consider the better ones, in my opinion. Now, I can't do that without starting off with A Touch of Evil. This is by Flying Frog Productions. It's good for 2 to 6 players, ages 12 and up, and should run about 60 to 120 minutes. In this game, this is set... You know what this game is? If you ever saw the Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci movie, Sleepy Hollow, I don't know for a fact, but it feels like that movie was a complete inspiration for this game. There's something going on in the small Shadowbrook village. There are multiple creatures responsible. Maybe it's a vampire, maybe it's a werewolf, maybe it's the Headless Horseman. There are multiple, and with the expansions, there's even more. You're playing... Now, this game can actually be played cooperatively or competitively. Either way, it can be soloed. You are trying to find out where the creature is, what its powers are, how you can defeat it. And you're doing that by collecting clues in the game, but also the elders, the town elders, are actually important NPCs in the game. Some of them, from game to game, from evil monster to evil monster, may be in league with them, may be responsible for them being in this whole reality. They could be a puppet, or they could be the puppet master. You never know which one, if any of them, from game to game. This game captures so much of so many of those feelings from the Headless Horseman style stories. It immerses you into this feeling. You're going to feel like you played through the Sleepy Hollow movie. And there's a few expansions for it too. A few small box, a few big box expansions. You can definitely turn this into a much larger campaign style game if you wanted to. Now, on a bit of a lighter note, but yet a very typical horror note, especially Halloween, especially if you know anything about Harry Houdini. Here we have a game, Mysterium. This is by OzmaD and is good for 2 to 7 players, ages 10 and up, and should run about 45 minutes. Now, this isn't a one versus all game. It's a one and all game. Because one player is going to be playing the spirit of the deceased person that wants to give this information to the psychics that are at the house. Who murdered them? Where? With what? What is the story and the reason? But you can only do that and communicate through these dream cards. All the other players are psychics who are trying to solve this classic murder and trying to interpret your clues that you are giving them. And the game plays out with a beautifully feel of it, a beautifully psychic and medium feel to it. I don't know of any other games actually in the market where you're specifically playing psychic mediums, but this game has it captured. I definitely think that for something different, yet typical for horror, and even just Halloween, for your horror shelf, go now, check out Mysterium. You'll thank me. Now we can't talk about cooperative horror games without mentioning one of the best, and that is Betrayal at House on the Hill. This is published by Avalon Hill, and it's good for 3 to 6 players, ages 12 and up. It should run about an hour 60 to 75 minutes. This game starts off completely cooperative. You and everyone else are going to investigate a haunted house, a house that's been there for generations. Everyone knows this place is haunted, and they always have. So now you and your friends, your team, your group are going there to investigate. A tile-based game, so the layout is always going to be different. The board will always look different. Multiple levels between a basement and an attic. And if you have the expansion, the Widow's Walk all the way up at the top. Now, during this game, you're going to be encountering a lot of strangeness. There's going to be weird encounters, just as you would expect from some sort of haunted house. But you're also going to be collecting these clues. And with certain items and clues happen after enough times, the haunt begins. And at this point, depending on everything you have, you look through the book and say, I have this, I got this there. This is the haunt. And it will tell you there's a list of 50 haunts. In the expansion, there's another 50. And in this explanation, it'll tell you who is the betrayer. And only at that moment will the player who is playing the betrayer will know they are the betrayer. They get a book, they go in another room, it tells them what they're doing for this scenario. The rest of the players get to read a passage in their own book explaining from their point of view what's happening and how to stop it. So literally, 1 minute you were helping your buddy, or your buddy was saving your character's life from getting destroyed or killed by some monster, and now they're the enemy. And it's so beautifully done since no one literally knows until the moment it happens. This is the epitome, one of the epitomes of a haunted house game. And that is why it deserves a spot on your horror shelf. Now, the last couple of games before I sign off are, I'm going to talk about one versus all games, because there are definitely a few good ones out there. Games that are worthy of being shelved. And to start things off with, let's talk about The Fury of Dracula. This is by Fantasy Flight Games. It's good for 2 to 5 players, ages 14 and up, and should run about 120 to 180 minutes. In this game, one player is literally Dracula. This takes place several years, I think 5 or something, after the initial events of Bram Stoker's novel end. Dracula has returned. He is alive, and he is trying to solidify power in Europe. Get all of Europe under his control. You and the other investigators, like Mina Harkin, all torn straight from Stoker's novel, have reunited to stop him once again. It's a hidden movement game. You don't know where the Dracula player is, but he will be leaving clues in certain places he visits. Some of them will be red herrings, some of them will be true clues, some of them will be dangers. He may have left an aristocratic vampire in one of the towns he was at, or left a reckless vampire there. It also utilizes a card-based sort of rock, paper, scissors system for combat that at first I wasn't sure about, but after playing a few times, I get it, and I totally enjoy that style of combat. Maybe Dracula is going in for the bite, but you have garlic. You have a card that has a garlic symbol on it, so that will stop it. It kind of works back and forth like that. But ultimately, this game is a tight cat and mouse type of game. I haven't played a game yet that it was completely overbalanced for one or the other, whether it's Dracula or the Hunters. If you're a fan of Dracula, the novel, any of the incarnations of the movies, this is literally the board game that is screaming to you. So go, check out Fury of Dracula. You're going to thank me. Now, there's another game, similar, called Letters from Whitechapel. This is by Fantasy Flight Games as well. It's good for 2 to 6 players, ages 14 and up, and should take about 60 to 90 minutes, maybe at most, I guess. And this is Jack the Ripper. One player is Jack, and the other are the constables. But this isn't a bloody game. This game takes place between the murders. The player playing Jack isn't going and killing the streetwalkers. That happens. That happened. Now, can the police find him and catch him? But it follows the actual story. Day by day, clues by clues, it follows the story. And playing the game, you quickly do feel like you have just been sucked into old London. And you were literally there, hunting or avoiding. It captures the feeling so amazingly well. This is the kind of game that you don't expect. Because when you think horror, you think monsters, not psychopaths necessarily. But this game captures it. This game captures the horror feel and the whole hidden movement together perfectly. Now, the last game, before I sign off, the last game I want to tell you about that is so worthy of your shelf is a franchise. It's an IP kind of game. It is something you're going to recognize. Even if you've never seen the movie or read the book. Just by me saying the title, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And that game is Jaws. This is brought to us by Ravensburger, and it's good for 2 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, and will take about 60 minutes, a little bit more maybe. And no matter how many players you have in the game, 2, 3, or 4, all 3 characters plus the shark are always used in every game. Brody, Quint, and Hooper. Even if it's one player and a shark player, that one player is playing all of the humans. This game is beautifully done. It makes you feel like part of the movie, or a movie, because it's done in 2 different acts. The first act taking place at Amity Island, where they are trying to their best to stop the shark from eating people. Because the more people the shark eats in the first act, the more powerful it's going to be in the second. And vice versa, the more work they do to stop the shark, the better they're going to be equipped in the second scene. The second scene is the orca. It's on the boat, and the shark player needs to just destroy the boat and kill the characters. And all they have to do is kill the shark. It is a guessing game of where the shark is going to pop up. The entire game is hidden movement, which is brilliant. Although there are ways for the humans to get around this, such as the fish finding radars. But this game, the cat and mouse, the balance, the back and forth between the Jaws player and the human players is brilliant and feels like the movie. This game is worthy to be on anyone's horror shelf. But if you're a fan of the movie, get it. Go get the Jaws board game. That's my opinion. All right, so there goes some great, basic, common, that's not the right word, some maybe, well, non-zombie, non-Lovecraftian horror games for your board game shelf. You want to start a general horror collection? You're not going to go wrong with those games I told you about. All right, everyone, thank you very much for joining me, your buddy Big Johnny G, for Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming. And my friends, I am out of here.